The Liberal government's majority in the House of Commons is about to get a little narrower. Today, Prime Minister Mark Carney announced that former Minister Jonathan Wilkinson will be leaving his seat to become Canada's new ambassador to the European Union. Wilkinson writes that leaving was a difficult decision, but 2026 is not 2015. The world has changed in fundamental ways. In this context, the Prime Minister has asked me to take on a different role in service to our country. Now, in the Trudeau government, Wilkinson serves as the Minister of Fisheries, of Environment, and of Natural Resources. But after winning the federal election last year, Mark Carney removed Wilkinson from his cabinet. So, why is Jonathan Wilkinson accepting the new post and leaving the House altogether? Here with me now to discuss this big career transition is Jonathan Wilkinson. Mr. Wilkinson, it's good to see you again. Congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you very much.
Your statement today highlighted how this is a critical time on the home front. So you're fleeing to Brussels to get away from it? I mean, how do you see your role working in that dynamic you outlined?
Well, I think it's a critical time for Canada in the context of turbulence globally, but certainly with respect to some of the challenges that we've had on the trade side with our friends in the United States. The Prime Minister has been very clear that for Canada to become more resilient, one of the things we need to do is enhance our trading relationships with others. And there is no better place to deepen relationships and to enhance the volume of trade that we do than with the Europeans, with whom we share common values, democratic institutions, et cetera. So I see this as a critically important enabling position for Canada to actually pursue those goals.
We have been talking on this show about your imminent appointment to the European Union since last year. Why were you waiting for the majority? Why did the calendar line up like this?
Well, I guess there are probably a couple of reasons. I mean, one is the Prime Minister talked to me about this and asked me to consider doing this some time ago. It took a little while for me to make the decision that this was the right thing to do for me and for my family. It's not insignificant that, my spouse will have to leave her employment and travel with me. So it took me some time to sort of think my way through that and to get to the point where I was, prepared to step down from my seat. I've lived in North Vancouver a long time. I see people on the street every day who I've known for many, many years, and this, that had to factor into my decisions. But the other is, even once we'd gotten to that point, the European Union is different than any other ambassador position in the sense that effectively every one of the 27 countries has a negative option, and so it's a much longer process to get approval from the Union.
Right. But how do you view going into this role? Because the European Union, when I look at sort of the leadership of von der Leyen and others, the issue set, those values, the economic objectives they have, it does align, I would say, with a lot of the things you proposed in the various portfolios you have held in public life. So it does seem like a natural fit, at least on a value sense. What are you hoping to be able to deliver on that?
Well, I think there's a lot we can do to enhance the trading relationship, for one, between the countries. That will require things like looking at enhancing regulatory alignment in some respects. Most of Canada's regulations are all aligned with American regulations, and there are ways, I think, for us to better integrate regulatory schemes with the Europeans so that it's just easier. The barriers are lesser. Certainly in some of the portfolios that I held, I mean, I did a lot of work with the Europeans. So areas in energy and in critical minerals and on the environment and climate change. In seafood, I was with Premier Houston yesterday. We were talking about seafood exports to Europe being critically important for Nova Scotia. I was Minister of Fisheries. So there are a lot of things in the background. I would also say, I spent 20 years in the clean tech sector, many of them as the Chief Executive Officer. There's enormous opportunity for Canada to leverage some of the work that's going on in Europe and for vice versa, for Europe to leverage Canada.
But on harmonizing regulations with Europe and might mean disharmonizing with the United States, right? There's already a lot of discord between our two countries as sort of the half-century economic relationship starts to fracture and unspool. How do you calibrate that particular approach? Because the U.S. doesn't view any kind of engagement with a rival in a positive way.
Fair enough. I mean, I'm not saying disengage with the United States. I mean, by dint of geography, we are always going to have a trading relationship with the U.S.
But if you need to change a regulation to align with Europe, you could get out of sync with the Americans,
Well, and I think you've got to be careful about that. But for example, our whole life sciences space is aligned with FDA regulations typically. There are European equivalent regulations that you could look to actually ensure the Canadian regulations are flexible enough that you could do more work with Europe. Certainly, the FDA has become an institution that has taken some different positions than what it has in the past. And I think it behooves us to look at whether there are ways we can actually make our regs more flexible in those areas, but also in other areas, such that we can actually accept European products more easily.
You wrote today that this work has demanded sacrifices, and I think anyone who's been in politics or watched it up close, like I have, you can see it. Like, people often look at people on these shows as avatars or something rather than a human being. But you say you've arrived at, you look back with real peace. What do you mean by that? What have you had to come to grips with as you get ready to make this next step?
Well, I look back at it in real peace because I think, many of us, and this is true across parties, I think, get into politics because you want to have an impact. For me, the issue that animated me to leave the private sector and come into politics was climate change and building an economy that could thrive in a lower carbon future. I got to be the Minister of Environment and Climate Change for several years. I was the minister that actually brought in the first climate plan in Canadian history that showed how we would actually meet and exceed a target. I got to be the Minister of Natural Resources and build the critical mineral strategy and a nuclear energy strategy and a clean electricity strategy and all of that. That's a great gift. I got to do things that most people never get to do. I am profoundly lucky that I did have that opportunity, and so I look back in peace because I think I accomplished a lot, but I am very appreciative of the opportunity.
Are you at peace with the direction the country is going in now? Like we spoke with Stephen Guilbeault on the show recently, and obviously you worked very closely with him and you know the issues that he has had, and he's expressed a lot of concern about the possible MOU with Alberta and where that could go. I know you both still broadly support the government and the Prime Minister. He wouldn't be an MP, you wouldn't be taking this job otherwise. But there is a policy difference, I think it is fair to say, on where this is going. Are you at peace on the direction of Canada on this critical issue that motivated you to get into this business to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, look, I would say there's a couple of things. First of all, the world we face today is a bit different than the world we faced 5 years ago. Yep. It is much more complicated. Geopolitics are a lot more complicated. We're moving to a much more multipolar world, which is always going to be less stable. Our relationship with the United States has been under some degree of pressure. And so those kinds of issues have come to the fore. And you see that in public opinion polling. People are really concerned about those issues and related issues and affordability. Of course, the government and the Prime Minister needs to respond to those kinds of issues. And so climate has perhaps been lower on the radar screen around the world than perhaps it was before. But that being said, the government continues to do work. I mean, there are two different ways to see the Alberta MOU. One is to say, well, some elements of the climate policy are not as strong, perhaps going forward. But the other way is to say this is about engaging Alberta in the fight against climate change. Like, to the extent that we get an Alberta that's committed to a strong industrial carbon price, that is moving forward with carbon capture and storage to be able to reduce emissions in the oil and gas sector, that's a good thing. And I guess I would also say, I've known Mark Carney for a long time. He was the UN advisor on climate when I was the Minister of Environment. I actually knew him when he was an investment banker and I was running clean tech companies. The Prime Minister really understands climate and he cares. He deeply cares about climate change. And so I would say I have great confidence that as we move forward, the government is going to continue the fight. It may look different. The timelines may be slightly adjusted, but I am quite confident that the government's going to continue to fight climate change.
Just as a final point, what are your timelines now? You've accepted this job, but you're still a member of Parliament. We're going to have a by-election with Mr. Bouleries, maybe with Nate Erskine-Smith. Obviously, this means there'll be a by-election in your riding. What were the timelines before, when you officially say goodbye to the House of Commons?
So I will be here through much of June, likely till the end of the session. That's a nice sort of departure point and a departure point, with my constituents as well. And I think my wife and I are looking at being over in Brussels sometime early in July.
Jonathan Wilkinson, congratulations on your career in Parliament, on your new appointment, and thank you for your time today. We've always appreciated when you come on the show. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.